Welcome to our side event called Beyond Compliance, discussing the impact of victim assistance standards on survivors' access to services. My name is Sofia Miranda Cogollos. I work for Humanity and Inclusion, and I will be your moderator today. This session is co-organized by Humanity and Inclusion and DRC, two organizations that have been advocating for victim assistance since a long time ago. Just to set the scene, I would like to take a small moment to explain what we mean when we are talking about this IMAS 1310, which is what brought us together today here. So I'm just gonna briefly tell you about this victim assistance standard that was issued in 2019 already and had a latest update in 2023. In practical terms, what the standard wants from the mine action sector, and especially from operators, is support on collecting data from victims and their needs, support in collecting data on available services, and then also to share that information with the victims and survivors that we find in the ground while we are working. Emergency medical transport of people critically injured by EO and other persons with life-threatening injuries, which I understand is a polemic one that we might be discussing later. And then communicate any service gap, victims' needs, and the VA projects that are being implemented. So basically, what the standard wants is the operators to be a bit a link between the field and those services available in coordination and at national level. So, that being said, I would like to start introducing our great panelists today that will, with whom we will speak about, like, okay, we have a standard. Is this standard actually working? Is fulfilling its purpose of improving the access to services of victims of explosive ordnance? And for that, we have a representation from the mine action authorities. So we have Mr. Mauricio Silva joining us from Colombia. He serves as the coordinator of the IMAS group of the Office of the Commissioner for Peace, that we all know as OCCP-IMAS. Mauricio brings nearly 2 decades of experience in mine action across government and international organizations, including OAS, Halo Trust, Humanity and Inclusion, and UNICEF. He played a key role. He has been supporting closely the development of mine action standards in Colombia from also a few years ago, and he holds a master's in international humanitarian action from Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. Welcome, Mauricio. We also have our dear colleague, Mrs. Marianne Schmidtland. I warned that I'm gonna be saying your names in Spanglish, so apologies for that. She is our armed violence reduction specialist in humanity and inclusion. She's currently based in Senegal. She has over 10 years of experience in the humanitarian sector. Marianne has worked across Afghanistan, the Sahel, Nigeria, Latin America, and the Middle East with several organizations like ICRC, DRC, and MAG. She currently oversees armed violence reduction programs in 7 countries in West Africa and holds a master's in Sciences Po Paris. We also have our dear colleague Nick Bob, from also working currently HMA manager with DRC, HTP.
Humanitarian Disarmament.
Yeah, HTP. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. With 8 years of experience in Ukraine and the occupied Palestinian territory, Nick has led victim assistance programs in some of the world's most acute emergencies and coordinated technical working groups also in this context, and produced research and advocacy on victim assistance and hostile context. Thank you so much for being here today. And then fourth, we have Mrs. Ingvild Madsen-Lamp, a senior advisor at the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD, where she works on humanitarian mine action and the protection of civilians from explosive weapons. Ingvild has previously served at the Royal Norwegian Embassy, thank you, in Yangon, and holds a Master in International and Development Economics. So this is our great panel today. The idea is that I'm going to ask you direct questions, and then we will have a time for the end, so we ask you to save your contributions and questions to the end of the questions to the panelists. So we will start with a question for Mauricio, who will give us his perspective from the Colombian experience on developing victim assistance standards. So we know Colombia has a long experience and is quite recognized in the mine action sector for their legislation related to victim assistance. And I would like Mauricio to tell us a bit how is the process or where Colombia stands today in developing victim assistance standards. What are the biggest challenges that you have been facing in translating these global guidelines into national action plans and into activities that are actually able to be implemented in the field? And if you believe this standard will strengthen the coordination that your office needs to do for victim assistance. So I give you the floor.
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you to my fellow colleagues. Thank you to all. Thank you, Humanitarian Inclusion and the Danish Refugee Council for convening this timely discussion. In Colombia, we are currently finalizing the National Victim Assistance Standard aligned with IMAS 1310. We are approximately 75% advancing in the drafting process, an achievement that reflects the sustained and committed work of the victim assistance component within IMA group, the group that I lead within the national government, led by a dedicated team of 2 women who have driven this effort with remarkable consistency and professionalism. We began this work in 2024, and from the outset, we understood that developing an operational standard cannot be done from a desk in the capital. We therefore built a participatory process to collect inputs from across the territory, including survivors' organizations, NGOs, the mining operators, government institutions, and United Nations partners. A key element in Colombia's approach is that the standard is grounded in the National Healthcare and Functional Rehabilitation Pathway for mine victims, led by the Ministry of Health and Social Protection. Our role from the Mine Action Authority is to coordinate, articulate, and advocate with all actors involved in each phase of the pathway to ensure victims can move through the full continuum of care in a timely and effective way. In practical terms, we are finalizing what we call the toolbox, annexes that clarify roles and responsibilities of each actor across the 5 phases of the pathway: pre-hospital care, emergency care, hospital care, functional rehabilitation, and comprehensive rehabilitation. Looking ahead, we intend to develop a national pedagogical rollout methodology so that the standard is understood and applied consistently across territories and institutions. This is essential because IMAS 1310 emphasizes the mine action support victim assistance through referral mechanisms and coordination. Those mechanisms only work when all actors clearly understand their roles and how to connect people to services.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. And I think it's great that you are advancing, or Colombia is advancing at the same time and doing the standard, developing the tools that would make it operational. So it's like at the same time doing the process with the partners, these pedagogical tools that you are mentioning will really ease the implementation, I hope. Okay, so we will continue, and we'd like to hear now from our operators in the field. So we will start with Marian, but I'm going to ask you both the same question. I want to have your perspective on what are the specific challenges, bottlenecks, but also good experiences that you have been facing in the field when it comes to making IMAS 1310 operational and fulfilling the obligations that are under the standard. And I also know that both organizations, HI and DRC, have done a lot of efforts also in supporting authorities in making these standards a national version. So I would also love to hear if you have advice for the authorities and other operators present in the room on how we can make this actually work in the field. So I'll give you the floor, Marian, and then Nick. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. I'm very impressed at the work done by Colombia and having this standard, implemented really put into operations in Colombia. I'm speaking on behalf of HI in West and Central Africa, but I've had some input from my colleagues in the Middle East, so trying also to feed the conversation with examples he shared with me. I think the first step towards the implementation of IMAS 1310 in the field is obviously support to national authorities where they are in every country. What we've been doing concretely in countries as HI, we have developed, we have done a VA workshop with the Burkinabe national authorities. We've also worked in Gaza, being also part of the VA technical working group, and also worked a lot with national authorities in Iraq when it came to IMAS 1310 and victim. Where does it start? I think it usually starts with the most, what you were just saying, Sophia, with implementing the tools and the forms, trying to put things into practice and then going back to the standard and trying to make it bigger at national level. So that's what we did in Iraq. That's what we're trying to do, and to have some formalized and some unified forms for incident forms and victim forms, and then those forms can be nationalized and used by all actors. When it comes to the bottlenecks and problems, I think we tend to underestimate the time and the resources needed when it comes to everything that's related to the victims' data, incidents data, and so on. Implementing a system is, putting a system in place is tricky, but keeping it in place is even trickier. And IM needs money, needs capacity, needs resources at national level from national authorities, and that's probably one of the biggest challenge, at least that we're facing in West Africa and the Sahel. And I'll just give the floor to Nick if you have anything to add.
Thank you very much. I want to take a step back, essentially, before. Thank you, sorry for that. I think victim assistance has a problem at the very outset in terms of misconceptions. I think we have a big problem with victim assistance, both internally as mine action operators, but also externally with the broader humanitarian system. And it does oftentimes, when you try to set up VA, when you try to set it up in an emergency context, becomes a big problem. It becomes a problem because funding is delayed and so on and so forth. And so there's quite a lot to be made at the beginning. I think having the standards is excellent, but I think a lot of it goes into, has to go into more marketing of VA, being a mine action activity first and foremost, being an emergency and a life-saving activity second to that. When it comes to problematics with the standard itself, I think for us, out of the obligations that mine action operators have, it was the service mapping that was one of those, perhaps the most difficult to set it up. We've noticed both in Ukraine and in OPT, victims obviously have multi-sectoral needs, and so you need to do mapping of pretty much the entire humanitarian system. And that's definitely caused quite a lot of problems. It takes a lot of time. It's difficult to update service mapping. Oftentimes it's understood as duplication of mapping of other clusters and so on and so forth. So there's quite a lot of issues with that. There's definitely, I think IMAS 13 is a little bit of a black box when it comes to certain elements of victim assistance. I think referral pathways are one of those things. IMAS would like us to assess the needs and then provide either at least information on the services or referrals to the services. All of those things I think are quite ill-defined right now, or not defined at all. And it's a little easier perhaps for HI and for DRC, as being some of the foremost protection agencies, to understand innately how to do referrals. But that is not the same case for every other mine action operators. And so that's certainly been an issue. How do we do quality management of victim assistance? That is a big black box. And so, whereas that is very well defined in EOD work, in risk education work, it is not defined at all in victim assistance. And so this is something that we've definitely struggled with. I've brought up emergency evacuations before. And so I will speak from experience. It's very difficult to operationalize that requirement. It's a shell requirement. In many cases, like Gaza, we wouldn't have the equipment needed. If there would be an evacuation process, it would take away resources from clearance activities, right? If we would have them, that means we stop doing clearance to aid people. I understand the moral imperative over there. It's just, out of experience, been very difficult to operationalize those things. And finally, then, towards capacity building of national authorities, we've done that very successfully in Ukraine and in the West Bank, because we had national authorities that were very willing and supportive of the victim assistance efforts. And that was monumentally different. We've had the NMA and the NMAS in Ukraine who set up the database for victim assistance from the very start. We have the West Bank. They already have a database. They already have a standard, a national standard that they're working on their own, very open to victim assistance. Not necessarily always the case for all governments, that VA would take such priority. Clearance would always take priority. Risk education can be pushed through some argumentation. VA is last, if at all. Thank you.
Thank you to both, and it's really great to see how much it can change victim assistance from one country to the other. In some countries we have really good authorities, functional, in some others not so much. In some countries we have 2, 3 authorities at the same time. So it always changes depending on the context, but some of those challenges are usually shared. And then, last but not least, I would love to ask Ms. Ingrid about, from your perspective, we have seen that victim assistance has always had a small percentage of what the aid when it comes to mine action funding, right? And it has been decreasing in the latest year, and we are expecting also for this year to have, for the reports of last year, to have even a bigger decrease. So in this shrinking budget situation, how should priorities be set when resources are shrinking, and what role can donors play in ensuring that the minimum commitments established under IMAS 1310 are actually sustained in the field? So how can we prioritize, and also how could you support so we guarantee that the minimum commitments are fulfilled? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting aspects from all of your sides. I think from our donor perspective from Norway, we want to ensure flexible long-term funding, and we put a lot of trust in our partners on the ground. So for us, it's also very important that we listen to you and adapt to what you need, and don't have a top-down approach where we decide what to focus on. We, of course, believe that victim assistance should be right-based and need-driven towards those most in need, and we fully support the focus on building national capacity and working with local partnerships, and especially organizations of those affected by landmines and other explosives. So I think for us it's important to put a lot of trust in our partners, and that's also why we are ensuring long-term funding, because victim assistance is not just ensuring help to those affected right away. It's also about integrating it into the broader system, and I think the plenary we had earlier today talked a lot about that, and I think that's very important for us as donors also to be able to look more broadly on the support. And from our perspective, we try to ensure that victim assistance is a clear part of our support when we fund mine action. We recently had a call for proposal where we had victim assistance as specifically prioritized, because we know that it's such an important part of the overall mine action work, and also the most underfunded pillar. And lastly, I think one thing that is really important now that a lot of funding is being cut. For Norway's side, we are maintaining the funding level, and we have committed funding for many years ahead. but we can't take this for granted. And we see even in Norway, public opinion towards aid in general is more and more skeptical. So I think it's also very important to show the results and show the broader impact, show that it is efficient and it makes a difference. So I think that's also something I think it's important that we collaborate with, that we can show the stories and keep the support to aid up in these difficult times where more and more donors are also cutting down on the budget. Because in the end, the funding that we give, it's the taxpayers' money, and we need to have the support of our taxpayers in order to keep the level high. So I think working together to ensure that we show proper results and that we can argue that it has an impact.
Thank you so much. And indeed, this particular point that you highlight on having long-term and flexible funding is key, because that has allowed that in some contexts where it's an emergency that comes in, we can really find the best way to either complement the services that are already existing or gap fill if it's needed. So that's great. Thank you so much for highlighting that point. And then now I would like to open the floor to all of you. I know you are here from authorities, but also from operators. So I really want to hear from operators how has been your experience implementing these obligations, but also I know there are people here that actually supported and advocated a lot for these standards. So I would also like to hear from you, what was the vision? How do you see things are going until now? So I already see a question there. Please say the name of your organization and your name. Thank you.
Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Katerina, DRC Ukraine Victim Assistance. And Nick, you mentioned that about data collection by government in Ukraine, by National Mine Action Authority. And this question will be for all panelists. And regarding the definition of explosive ordnance, and yeah, you are smiling. Definition of explosive ordnance in IMAS, it's quite limited by only that explosive ordnance, like only mines and explosive remnants of war. It doesn't include other weapons that can be used and during shellings, for example. And regarding the context in Ukraine, Gaza, in Lebanon now, maybe it's a good point to initiate some amendments in IMAS 3010, including the context in these countries, in Ukraine as well. And it's very important now because National Mine Action Authority, following the IMAS 3010, collect now information about only mines and explosive remnants of war incidents, and all the people who was injured or killed by shellings, they are just missed for government. Of course, this information is collecting by UN, but for government it's a gap. But shouldn't it do state authorities? Thank you.
Thank you. Any response? Yes.
Yeah. And then I'll pass it on. Yeah. So thank you very much for bringing that up. I wouldn't stop first and foremost at just collecting data on EO victims. I think what data we usually collect for centralized databases, either by the NMAA or the interim NMAA, very much follows the minimum standards of 510 IMAS. And so we collect very, very specific but very, very limited data when it comes to victims. And when you try to provide then assistance to victims, it almost becomes a necessity to start doing more comprehensive assessment with every victim, because we collect very little data in these centralized databases. That's first and foremost the problem that we have. And then for anybody who wants to listen to a bit of the sort of theoretical explanation, a victim of explosive ordnance very much relies on the definition of what an explosive ordnance is, okay? So it will be UXOs, AXOs, landmines, and certain other conventions, weapons. What it will notably not include in that definition is being a victim of active shelling, of what would be covered under the WIPA declaration, for example. And what it doesn't also cover is small arms and ammunition, or small arms and light weapons. And so when you look at, in emergency settings, those two last groups overwhelmingly bring in the victims in any given context. It's true that after a war will end, those will have gone down and it will be the EO victims that will go up. But the difference is massive. In Ukraine, I think we had, I don't know, at the beginning around 500 victims, but we had 30,000 people who have gotten injured with explosive weapons used in populated areas. The same in Gaza and so on and so forth. So I think it's very much in place to start discussions around who victim assistance supports. And I think it is within the mandate of HMA operators to extend it beyond just EO victims to also include WIPA and SOLVE victims. That's from my side, but if anybody else wants.
I think it's a very good question, and I think that the point is being considered as a victim, as IMAS 1310 defines the victim, doesn't mean if you don't enter the definition by IMAS 1310, doesn't mean that you're not going to be supported. If I take the examples of what we're doing in Mali or in Burkina Faso and Niger, we have this non-discriminatory approach. If we get a person with disability, if we get a victim of armed conflict as a broader kind of problem, this person is going to be eligible to victim assistance. So I think there's a bit of a separation to do between, yes, there is the standard, but then there is the assistance and what we can do in the field as protection organization or as being able to refer to other organization. And it means the person is not going to be asked if it was a victim of bombing or shelling before being, accepted into the hospital. And I think that's the practicality is non-discriminatory, but when it comes to defining and putting this in a database with a national mine action authority, we need to have a very clear definition.
And if I could also add, I think the standard thought about that and mentions the principle of non-discrimination. So even if it recognizes that there are specific conventions that, cover mine action and that guide the action of operators, it's also included there that at the end the help should be prioritized based on the needs and the services. Mauricio, do you have something to say? Because I know from the Mine Action Authority perspective it could be interesting.
Yes, the importance of this victims assistance standard within the Colombian legislation and normative is very important because we needed to make the definitions within the international the IMAS collide with the norms and legislation under the Colombian law. We have a victims assistance law for the armed conflict in general, so this make more useful the use of the methodologies and mechanisms of the victims assistance regarding victims activated ordinances. So that's where national mine action authority has more relevance in order to share information from all the HMI operators and then have a more comprehensive way to achieve victims assistance.
Thank you. Elke, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the speakers. To the question that you just asked, I also just would like to add my 2 cents. My name is Elke Hottentodd. I work with Humanity and Inclusion. I was involved in the writing of the standard. And I really would just like to go back to what you were just raising, Nick, on the definition of victims. So the definition of victims in IMAS 1310 is very much the definition that was defined in the Convention on Cluster Munitions. So it's all people injured and killed, people living in affected areas, as well as family members of people injured and killed. So what does that mean in terms of the victim assistance specific efforts that IMAS 1310 outlines? So the purpose of IMAS 1310 is very much to integrate the victim assistance specific efforts in EORE, land release, and information management, so as to ensure that the HMA sector does its part to contribute to facilitating access to services to all people in need of services living in EO affected areas. So whether you are injured by a car accident and you're in need of services, or your diabetes is not managed properly and you're being threatened with an amputation, or you were injured by an EO of any type, is not the determining factor of whether IMAS 1310 should support you in accessing services. So I think there's a sort of a false understanding about, who can benefit from IMAS 1310 and who cannot. The purpose is to facilitate access to people living in areas their AO operations are active, where Mine Action is implementing risk education or community liaison or non-technical survey, and to facilitate access to services on the basis of information. And we know that lack of access to information on what services are available generally poses as the first barrier to accessing services. Now, IMAS 1310 defines referral extremely narrowly. The Global Protection Cluster would call that orientation. Referral is defined as providing minimal information about the services that are available. It's not making a call. So when a risk education provider meets somebody in need of services, ideally they have a mapping of services that only is limited to the area in which you are implementing your risk education or land release operations, and you let that person know where they can go. Basta la musica. Now, there are multi-mandated organizations that go further, or mine action operators that decide to go further. If they have a social worker, a protection case manager on their team, they may hand over that person to provide further support, including sometimes financial support for transport to access the services. But I think we really need to go back to basics, and that is that there's no distinction based on the cause of your injury. You're in need. IMAS 13 there is there to support you. Mine action personnel is available. They should have access. They should have that data on what services are available and provided. And I mean, we did a lot of work on the standardizing beneficiary definitions version 2. I'm looking at Sebastian. We really pushed for that on BA. That was adopted into IMAS 510. And Nick, I heard you on there's no quality management for IMAS 1310 yet, but there is a really important accountability mechanism through IMAS 510 reporting on victim assistance. So who benefits from receiving access to information? What number, of people, where we know, for example, in a geographical area, there's a massive need for mental health and psychosocial support. That information is being carried out to Ministry of Health to say, look, you really need to set something up here. Like, there's very clear beneficiary definitions of IMAS 1310. So it's not as good as QM and QC as we have for clearance operations. But if that is already being done, you could show to a donor, who I understand really needs to demonstrate impact of the funding to the public, you've got it. I mean, the number of people that could be served through IMAS 1310 in areas where no other services exist are phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we had another question here, please.
Yes, thank you. It seems that Elke, you covered the majority of what wanted to say, but it always can add something from the experience, recent one in Libya. We were discussing about definition, about standardization of the definition of the victims, and we will probably go for at least advise National Mine Action Center to take the broader definition, where we can include not only landmines, explosive weapons by the clusters victims, then the victims of the small arm light weapons, etc., etc. After the shellings and everything. However, and when Nick, you mentioned quality management, then I was also thinking about the other thing. We always try to say that victim assistance is equal part of humanitarian mine action. Equal part, okay? So I'm sorry for my understanding, very, very straightforward. I would expect then, as for victim assistance, we also have the same standards for the quality management, NICS, yes, the same standards for even the trainings, protocols, for the profile of the structure and the profile of the members who are providing this, the services, at least from the point of the international organizations. Because, from experience, I find sometimes it's very hard to understand, to hire, recruit the person who will be responsible for victim assistance. Should we look for someone who are in the psychosocial support? Should we find someone who is in the health? You know, who is the best, who is the most appropriate, or in education if we come to the children, etc., etc. So I think that maybe we should start from the point of the international community actors who are providing support to government institutions, start doing revision, Katya, of the IMAS 1310 and try to equalize victim assistance with all the others 4 remaining pillars of mine action, plus including cluster munition, plus including small arm, light weapons, etc. So this is just like thoughts, experiences that everybody who are thinking the same, you are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there any reaction to that before we move to the next question?
Yeah, and a quick one from me.
Okay. A quick one, so we have...
I think we all agree in this room on the importance of VA, but just to reinforce the fact that VA is probably the beginning and the end of what we work for. You know, having information on incidents and victims give you information about where the problem is and how big the problem is. So when I think, we also think about the definition, it's also understanding the scope of the problem and nature of the problem. So that's where we need to also put resources. Assisting is also understanding. And VA, understanding the scope of the problem helps better risk mitigation, better clearance, better NTS, better everything. And so I think in the end, you need to adapt the standard to any country and blah, blah, blah. But I'm always back to resources, because having a good data system in place when it comes to understanding the scope of the problem, following up on incidents, following up on victims, and also considering the sensibility of some information. And here I can talk about Central Sahel. I know it's very hard. It's very hard to centralize this information. It's very hard to collect this information. So it's not, at the end, it's just not a piece of cake, but it's central. It needs resources, time, and dedicated staff. I'm just always back to this.
I've been very, very happy to see so many events on VA here at the NDM. You know, it's been since 2019 when the standard was published, to come here and talk about nuance. I think it's a big step to talk about the nuance and how we read IMAS and 1310. And I would love to have you in every donor meeting that I have, because to date I still have a lot of the national databases only recording EO victims under a strict EO definition. I still have donors who will say only support EO victims, not anybody else. So it's great that there is a reading of IMAS that is broader. We just need to make sure that it comes across for everybody, for mine action operators, for donors, for national mine action authorities. But I think it's important conversations to have. Yeah.
Thank you. I had one first there, and then Sebastian.
Hi, it's Dominic Woolsey from GICHD. Thanks so much for the great panel. It's great to hear about the progress in Colombia on the victim assistance standard. I actually wanted to pick up on the comment also from Nick on the quality management point. And I'm speaking also having had a small part in the drafting process for the IMAS. But it's interesting to hear that the quality there isn't a quality system being applied, because at the moment, as it stands in IMAS 1310, I think one of the goals was to delineate the lines between, you know, through an integrated approach between broader efforts and VA-specific efforts, and to avoid duplication of the mine action sector taking on the responsibility, for example, regulating the delivery of services such as rehabilitation or psychosocial support. So I guess my question is, is it appropriate for, you know, a mine action authority to develop a standard and then to have a quality system to follow up and check up on that standard, for example, physical rehabilitation, when we know that also people may seek those services from out with the mine action sector. At the moment, based on the IMAS, it's not one of the responsibilities of the Mine Action Authority, and I think it's just important to repeat that so that we don't avoid duplicating efforts, for example, from the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Social Affairs or something like this. But what I'm hearing from what you said is that maybe that's not happening, that regulation isn't happening. So how do we square that circle? Thanks.
Feels brave.
Brave. No, I can give it a try. It's not something that is fully developed. I'll just give you my free thought process of it. I think for quality management, we're talking mostly about the activities that are internal to mine action operators. And yes, true, victim assistance, it should be long-term state integrated programming. And there, perhaps the IMAS does not really have the prerogative to tell what national institutions should check compliance with. I'm mostly concerned about activities that I'm trying to operationalize. And in the IMAS, at least, I'm now finding guidance on what needs to be quality checked. So I go and retreat back to the protection principles and how we do protection at DRC. But that is a available resource for me to have that may not be necessarily available to everybody. But I agree, there's quite a complicated way of doing quality management of these things. I'm only concerned for the operator side of things. Yeah.
I would like to add also, I think the process of developing the standard itself shows quite well these gaps. And then even if it's not the responsibility of the standard itself to develop a procedure on health, on how the rehab things should be done, it raised the flag because it brings together the ministries, it brings together the victims, it brings together the operators. So it's when everybody's sitting at the table trying to make one single phrase, right? That is like data collection, or one single phrase that everybody starts, and Mauricio can say, but also we saw it in the case of Iraq. It's like suddenly you have 5 laws that are concerning the same thing, and then you have the ministry representative, the Ministry of Health, sitting there at the same time that an operator is telling you, this doesn't work. This doesn't work in the field. No, but you know, we have the decree 5, 10, la, la, la. And it's like, yeah, but it's not working. And this is actually how this idea on the pedagogical tools was developed. Like, okay, the operators were saying, yes, for the standard, but we need more because those gaps also need to be addressed at the same time. So all of this to say, the standard is not going to sort out all of those things, but it really brings people together to prioritize what are the main gaps and where the effort should be focusing on.
As Sofia mentioned when she introduced me, I've been around mine action in Colombia for several years now. And when IMAS 1310 came to life, I was very opposed for Colombia to really start the designing and the construction and the adaptation of that IMAS into a national standard due to the fact that we in Colombia have a consistent and comprehensive health care and protection system under the Ministry of Health and Protection. So at that time, I thought that was practically a waste of time because we were going to tell other ministries and other instances how to behave in terms of fulfilling the rights of victims, specifically EO victims. But now that we have embarked in this enterprise, it has shown to be very productive because it has set the dialogue between or among all the actors regarding victims assistance, definitions, how to collect data, how to really translate what is happening in the field to be more reliable and more consistent with the norms and the legislation, and especially how the Mine Action Authority has a relevant role regarding victims assistance within the whole health and protection system. So those discussions have proven being very, very relevant and productive.
Thank you. And I think we had one question here. Go ahead, Seba.
Yeah, I just wanted to second Maurizio in the beginning. We were against the new IMAS. Why would you need that? It's not mine action per se. It's really all outside mine action that has to look into victim assistance. But then I was part of writing the IMAS with several people in the room, and it's I think it turns out to be useful. And now I talk about my initial talking point, basically the mandate of the HMA operators. And our colleagues, I'm from MAG, Sebastian Kazak, Mine's advisory group basically says, no, it's not our mandate. We don't do victim assistance. And I have to keep hammering because people don't read every single IMAS, which is fair enough. But that you have to accept this, what is our role within it, so the scope. And yes, we do play a role in supporting victim assistance. And that's slowly, I mean, it's been 6 years already, but it is trickling in. People are understanding it more and more. And we are writing proposals to Norway, for example, where it is included, the referral systems and so on. So we have some very good programming in some countries around victim assistance and the referrals, Myanmar, but others not, where it could be the case and so on. So as a mine action operator, we are on a learning curve. And usually we ask, let's say, HI to provide training to our guys, and so that everyone understands what is victim assistance about. But I want to go a step further now that we basically have the capacity in-house to provide that training to our own staff. Because the community liaison people who are really on the ground and collecting this data, and I always say every question raises expectations. And they are frustrated when asking about victims and so on. They can't do anything about it. So for them to be able to communicate better and longer and look at these referral pathways, etc., is really important also for the mental health of our own workers, in a way, having to collect all this terrible data. And just the last point before I stop, on injury surveillance. It's an important point we have put also in the IMAS and so on, but it's all about how do we collect that data. And the data in a good, like in Sri Lanka, we worked a lot about this, on the injury surveillance. So the data is being collected about injuries, but then the injury data is not specific what was the cause of this incident. So when I was in Ukraine a few years back with UNICEF, it was exactly this point, talking to the state services, you guys have to the medicine catastrophe. So the catastrophe guys, they have to put basically in their data what was the cause. Then we can use that data, and they all exist. We don't have to collect all that data. They're already collecting it. But so it's just linking these systems and having better data collection as well. Often we don't have to collect all of this stuff. We don't need to be so proactive. There are existing systems, but they're not talking to each other. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. I always get back to mine action is part of the protection. We're part of protection, and mapping of services is, I know it's not always perfect. I know sometimes it's not working. I know sometimes at local level it's not updated properly, but I think we should also work more with the protection clusters at local level when it comes to humanitarian context. It's a bit different when it comes to development, but the mapping of services, we don't need to do everything by ourselves. I mean, taking the formats of the protection cluster, working with them, pushing them is central. Sometimes it's a bit tiring, but it's very central.
Okay, I have one question. Who wants to go first?
We kind of agreed that I would go first, thanks. Feroz Alizada from the Implementation Support Unit of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention. I also had the opportunity to be part of the drafting of the IMAS 1310. It sort of feels a responsibility to go back to the question of non-discrimination. I think what Elke said is totally I agree with, but also to remember in the very introduction of the IMAS, there is a recognition of the 4 conventions there. The 3 disarmament conventions, as well as the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I think, if I remember well the discussions then, there was tons of meetings, that anytime that there is a question in relation to discrimination or anything that has to do with a standard, we have to put it in the context of legally binding instrument, which is those conventions. And perhaps this convention doesn't apply to all states, to all contexts, but The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability is very universal now, and I think that would provide you the higher standard in relation to assisting victims and persons with disabilities. And I will end with one question, perhaps, if I may, to the director from Colombia. In relation to the question of liability, I think we started discussing in the previous side event. Have you ever had any discussion with the operators when you developed Colombia's IMAS 1310? How do you see it? If an operator say, okay, I have liability, I cannot transport casualties, new victims to hospitals, how do you respond to that? What guarantees can you provide? Thank
you. We haven't had that specific discussion, even though I can say that in Colombia is very relevant the principle of the impossibility to be neglecting to provide help. Yeah, it's kind of a felony. You cannot withdraw from helping people in need or in urgent assistance. So when we are discussing primarily with the mining operators, that's the situation where we arrive. If you happen to be in the presence of an accident or an incident, you need to help, and then you will see with your donor, and you will see with our internal legislation regarding protection and assistance. Did I answer your question? Sort of? Okay.
Hello, my name is Sasha Logie. I'm the IMAS secretary, so I chaperone IMAS developments and updates, and it's great to see so many people who were involved in writing this IMAS. How many years did it take us to write it? It was quite a long one, huh? And it was quite a difficult one to write. So I think just sort of the fact that we have a standard in this area in it is quite an achievement itself. Looking at Sebastian and Elke. Listen, IMAS is written by the mine action community, by all of the operators, or many of them at least, the national authorities, the donors. We have 29 members on the IMAS review board. These are standards written by the sector for the sector. If you have improvements, if you want to see changes, go to the Mine Action Standards website, mineactionstandards.org, hit submit proposal button, and share your insights directly with us, and we can have a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am really happy that this was quite a debate and a conversation, and that I hope that we will continue discussing more and more victim assistance, as you mentioned. It was not so present before in this kind of events, and now today we have been ongoing the conversation from the morning to now, so I think that's great, and it also takes you guys being here after lunch with all the meetings that you have. I would like to close just quickly asking you a final remark, like on the big question of this side event, which is like, is it working? What is working? And what needs to change when it comes to implementing this standard in the field? So who wants to go first? Mauricio.
Well, as I have said, I think it is working. In terms of the work that I've been doing in Colombia, the discussion has proven to be relevant in terms of just bringing to the discussion the definition of victims, who is a victim under our law, you know, and to see how bigger mine action has become in our country. So as victim assistance has certain level of relevance and is an alike context and alike concept, we are receiving news from other victims that try to come under the umbrella of mine victims, like victims from the explosives sent by drones, or other kind of terrorist acts. So it has proven that it's a very useful conversation. I think it works, and also it brings to light the way we are collecting information regarding victims, how we are how we are doing the characterization of victims, how this characterization needs to be alive during the process of the attention to the victims. One thing is when the accident happens, and one thing is 5-10 years after, because the victim is still a person with disability, and the caregivers, the whole system around that specific victim, even though the accident happened 5, 10, 15 years ago, he or she is still a victim and needs to be within the system. And as Colombia has several agencies and institutions in charge of victims assistance in several places, this thing that we are doing by building or designing a toolbox, I think it's going to be very significant, because each person within our institutionality is going to know, hey, I know where to find what to do, and how to assess and manage the situation.
Thank you so much. You would like to add something? Yes, please.
Very quickly, I think this IMAS 1310 overall tells us that VA is not an option, and I think to going back to what Sebastian was saying, we were against it. Now we not only we have to do it, but we do realize that VA and doing and implementing this IMAS 1310 gives us acceptance and access to the field, and acceptance because we actually, refer properly people. They can get, the service that they need, and that's probably why and what we're here for. So I think that's the main takeaway of this.
Yeah, no, I think this has been a super interesting discussion. Victim assistance is not an option, but I think it's perceived as an option from many donors, and I think it's important to still focus on that's the core of mine action in the end, because the survivors of explosive ordnance, those are the reason why we are clearing, of course. And so when you do land clearance, it is very tangible results. You get them almost right away. And I think it's a way to sell it in more on what can you actually achieve by doing victim assistance on a larger term, not just tomorrow, but in 5 years, 10 years, and how can you integrate them back to society? It's also an important piece aspect in this as well. So one thing is showing the result you managed to do with the funding you have, but it's also maybe to show the scope that is possible. What would be possible if you received the same amount of funding that clearance get, for instance? I think that could be a very interesting selling point as well, to see what could actually be changed then.
They're already clapping.
We got an early applause over here. Well, my message specifically is for HMA operators, okay? I think it's very important for all of us to acknowledge that victim assistance can be done. We have put it in place before, and that it's actually quite easy to put that. So if you worked out EOD operations, you can work out how to do victim assistance as well, okay? Definitely, first and foremost. Now, you may say, like Sebastian said before, most of VA is done by some other sector. Fair enough, but it is anchored in mine action, okay? Because if it's not anchored in somebody, then the victims are left completely on their own, trying to navigate 15 different clusters to get the aid that they need. And that is, I think, critical for mine action to understand. And that's what I want to leave everybody with. It can be done, and also, as everybody has said before, it must be done. And it must be done by us. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, the panelists. Please give them a big applause. and have a good rest of the conference. Thank you so much.